Hi, this is Jorley, and the question that I want to start with here, and then I will kind of explain why this came to mind right now or recently in a moment. But the question is, who are you giving the best parts of yourself to? Are you aware? And by best parts of yourself, this has to do with, we all have times of day where we're more productive. I tend to be more of a morning person, and I try to, if I'm doing anything writing or anything creative or that requires focus, or even a meeting that I really need to be on point and able to focus and listen, that to me needs to definitely be before noon and earlier than that. Like after 3 p.m. I'm kind of done. So I'm sure most of you are aware of this. And, some people just really, they get their second wind in the evening or even their first wind, whatever that is. So, relating this to a business or your own flexible, work schedule that you're in control of, is just remembering to, create your schedule in such a way that it supports that. But it also has to do with, the idea or the reality that we don't have infinite time, right? So sometimes we will prioritize things and then just deprioritize, mostly by forgetting to even acknowledge them or leave them out. The things that maybe seem less important because they're not making us as much money ahead of time, or a lot of us put things that are close to our heart or that kind of rejuvenate us, and we put those last. So then we find ourselves, just exhausted and spent, and have, unless you make the time for yourself, it's not going to happen. But the reason this came up and how this relates to the business world is I reconnected, just on social media with somebody who I used to work with, who also now has worked for themselves for a while. And I mean, there's so many people I love and I don't get to catch up with, and our work doesn't relate anymore, but I always wonder how they're doing. And so I'll often say, hey, let's just catch up on let's do like a 30-minute Zoom and catch up, or virtual coffee. So this person and I were trying to schedule this, and it was, it can almost be a comedy of errors when you have two people with very full work and home lives. So we were going back and forth a couple of times, or we'd even scheduled it and then something came up. And what was nice, I do appreciate working with people, and I tend to be this way if a meeting needs to be rescheduled, like, very gracious about, and it wasn't one of us that kept having to move it. It was both of us. Anywho, so we were trying to figure out when we could actually meet. And then this person let me know, like, it was a very narrow window of when they were suggesting we meet, and it didn't entirely line up with the slots that I had. But one thing that really jumped out at me was they said, well, like, these times she's not available because that's when she meets with her clients. Meaning paying clients, right? I'm just trying to catch up and say hello, and, maybe there would be some work synergies, but really that's not the reason for this call. So I understand that conventional wisdom, but it had this light bulb moment for me because, they were basically, she was saying, so these days and times is not, I'm not going to meet with you, essentially, because that is for my clients. And although on one level I do understand, in terms of organizing your schedule and making sure that you have enough time to actually do the things that pay your bills, I relate to that as well. But it also made me think that I felt, in the way it was written, like I was less of a priority because I'm not directly tied to her making money. Now, that's not how she put it, but that was this, recognition that I had. And, and it really, it just made me think. It was just like, why do we ultimately, it's a lot of times there are I don't know, to me it feels revelatory sometimes, certain understandings, because I was so blinded by them because they seem so obvious. But this is one of those things in our culture, we tend to always prioritize something that has a monetary value associated with it. And so again, not to say, I know in this world we do need money to come in, but why should that be the primary way of determining whether or not I should use this time? So I thought that was interesting, and that's something that I wanted to think about too. Am I, there are certain, to me, relationships, like I find myself in the last couple of weeks, and I'm recording this in June 2021. So where I live, this is the end of school year. And if you have kids, or if you're a teacher or whatever, it's like, I kept calling this is like the birth canal of summer. I feel like we're just getting pushed out and like pushed by all of these end of school year activities. And it's been fucking intense. So I absolutely get that. I also need to be aware of, okay, do I have enough time just to get, the work done that I've committed to and that I need to make a living? But I have found myself in the last couple of weeks, where, taking an hour in the middle of the day to meet a friend for lunch or to take a walk and, to do social things in a time of day that is, generally considered part of the workday. And I will have a moment in my mind sometimes where I'll think, like, I honestly, it's so rare, especially some of these friends are also just as full lives. It's rare, some of them, that I even get to see them. And so I will generally say yes to that first if I don't have a work conflict already on the books, and tend not to worry about, how am I going to make up this time? Whatever. I tend to say yes to that decision, which I feel good about. And it's been a long time to get to that point. But I'm also, human and not completely unindoctrinated from our culture, which is, really very much associates our value with productivity. How much have you done? How much money do you make? Blah, 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 blah. So once I set the priority of friendship or rest or, just unproductivity in the middle of what most people would consider to be the time of day when you, quote, should be productive, I will sometimes have a moment where I'm like, should I be doing that? And I tend to say, F it. And I do it. But yeah, so the last thing I want to talk about is, it's just, for those of you that have recently moved from, a more regimented schedule, because the pandemic has created a lot of these shifts. So either you moved from, being employed, traditionally, to being self-employed, or, having much more rigor around your schedule because you were at the office and now you work from home, and obviously there's still meetings to attend and there's still things to get done, but you might have more flexibility. So if you've recently moved to a time in your life, which a lot of people have, where you have a little bit more sovereignty over your schedule, a little bit more autonomy, the thing that comes to mind is, that I think might be helpful is just reminding yourself that you are in control of your time, and to not say yes to things, to meetings, to ways of spending your time that are not something you care about. So just, taking that sovereignty over your schedule. And so the thing that comes to mind is, for me, the last corporate job I had, there were a lot of people would just, again, I love this. It was a culture where they would do a lot of coffee chats. So anybody could reach out and request time in your calendar to say hello and to get to meet them. So you never knew what was going to come of that. And I actually really love that they encourage that, because this is like many corporate cultures, every minute of your day is accounted for. And I love that they prioritize that. At the same time, in a hierarchical structure, like if somebody senior to you is requesting a meeting, or, if there's a lot of meetings that you are invited to that are, you are essentially feel like you were obligated to respond yes, right? So if a client requested a meeting, and so just very little control over your schedule. And so when I left that company and started to work for myself, I had a couple of people reach out for meetings, and I was not, these might have been a potential client or whatever, but I was not excited to have these meetings. And I had this moment where I was like, oh, I'm just going to say no, because, I also had young kids, still do. And I was aware that if I were to say yes to this, then like I have this really finite amount of time. So I said no to things more often. I felt like when I worked for myself, I had that, I don't know, I now was allowed to do that. But I think that whether or not you work for yourself or you work for somebody else, you can say no to these things. Even, question whether you can say no or not, whether you have to attend that meeting, or whether you can suggest that it is, going to be less, or to just say no entirely. I think that it is, really important. And I just had this light bulb where I was like, when I worked for myself, I thought, I can't actually say yes to these things because I need to guard my time. It's more precious now. But then I thought I was actually doing my previous company where I was employed by them a disservice, just actually even saying yes to everything that came my way for them, because I wasn't as productive, as an employee either. And so I thought it was interesting that, when it was my own time, I finally had the light bulb to be like, I can say no to a lot. I have to say no to a lot of these things. But I would push back and say, whether or not you are employed by somebody else, or for yourself, that you get to say no, and that every person on this earth, your time is precious. Whether you are a CEO or you have not been, you are unemployed, whatever. I know what that means if you're not getting a paycheck, but we all have things, we're all important, and we have things that matter to us that, we need to guard and protect sometimes. So, it's a nice thing to ask yourself, or it's a helpful thing to say, am I saving the best parts of myself? So going back to how I started this conversation, where we have times of day where we are more alive and more vibrant, and, and it might not even be every day. We also cycle, depending on the time of the month or what's going on in our life. But if we have time that we are rested and feel good, my question is, are you also saving that, and this is coming from somebody who is, I am a self-professed, recovering workaholic. Like, my tendencies have always been towards working more rather than less, and squeezing too many things into my day rather than not having enough. But so, are you saving ever the best parts of yourself for your loved ones? Or are they kind of getting the dregs, right? They're just getting what's left over after you've just exhausted yourself on everything else. And then another very important loved one, like, do you ever save any of the best parts of yourself for yourself? Like, for yourself alone? And what I mean by that, do you have, are you creating, and some of this just needs to be space on your calendar, blocks on your calendar for time to rest, to be aimless, to do something, quote, frivolous. Is it cooking? Is it walking in the woods? And, there's this idea of self-care has really taken off, thankfully. But it almost, that term can be overused, and it can be, it's easy to just be like, oh, are you, doing a massage now and then, rather than like, are you creating a life that is, sorry, I'm just going back to this word balance, which is important to me, but again, it can be misconstrued and overused. But is your day-to-day life incorporating what I call, fallow times. And again, this just comes from somebody who has in the past, ended up deprioritizing things related to the home life and things related to just nurturing myself and yeah. So that is the question. Really, where are you saving parts of the best parts of yourself? And being aware of, just being aware of that and doing it more consciously and creating a schedule, and a life intentionally that, that you don't just kind of stumble through life and then just end up at a certain place, but that you take control over, what you're giving and not always prioritizing things, or if you are prioritizing something because it is something that will make you money, making sure that you're not making all of your decisions based on that. All right. I hope this is helpful, and have a good rest of your day and week. Take care.